Hi, I'm Dr. Shiloh.
And I'm Dr. Scott.
And this is LA Not So Confidential, the forensic psychology and true crime podcast.
Each episode, we explore the intersection of psychology, the criminal justice system, and entertainment.
Today, our episode is on the forensic psych topic of AI psychosis.
Oh, okay. So welcome back, everybody. Going to do a little housekeeping here for our last episode. We just started recording, and Dr. Shiloh, you seemed a little peppy.
I
Didn't
did?
seem sad at all about this being our last episode. You're quite buoyant. What the hell?
I told you. I mean, I've been changing some lifestyle things. I've not been drinking caffeine very often, or I'll do a lot of half calf. I have made it through work days without any caffeine and I'm fine, but I did have caffeine this morning.
Okay.
So I was like, I'm going to need this for this one marathon episode and just all the things today for our recording session.
Yeah. I've been doing half calf for a couple of years now and had this really, as I've talked about before, that's really successful heart ablation surgery that's very common and very successful. Yeah. And I thought, well, let me just see if I can still maintain. And so half calf 2 times a day, basically a full cup each day split up.
Yeah.
But then, wow, I forgot one day and had a regular, because it's like pumpkin spice latte season. And I thought I was seeing into another dimension. There was so much caffeine.
Well,
in the
and
full
sugar.
Coffee. Yeah.
So I'm half calf today, and the other half of me is denial. So that's, we're here with our last episode.
Well, I'm half calf and my usual neuroatypicality. So there we go. But welcome back, everybody. This is our last formal episode. We are gently closing the doors on LA Not So Confidential. Although, as we've said before, our Patreon will remain up. We don't foresee any more behind the couches in the future. But for our Patreon members, we will be continuing to do what we call shrink wrap. We're not going to have a regular schedule for it. We are going to be adding a lot to the Patreon channel as additions. There's going to be probably eventually a full library of transcripts, research materials, as we sort of take our energies and our creative drive into a slightly different area. And You'll hear about that later on as soon as we get our breath back from the last 8 years, right?
And of course, yesterday, you and I were both like, we have ideas.
Oh my God.
God dang it. No, we have to stick to the plan.
I know. I mean, it just, there's so many things coming up right now, but those are going to be really great for the shrink wraps.
Yeah,
and then we'll tie those into previous. It's just about, and even, one of our listeners, John, wrote us the sweetest letter about recognizing the amount of research that we put in. And I really appreciated him saying that, because I think there's something that has been setting us aside from a lot of true crime podcasts, and maybe to our detriment. Maybe, the show would have been bigger if it was more salacious. And I don't mean that in a bad way. Salacious sells. But we really wanted to let this be a legacy of a combination of true crime as content or entertainment and some information. And we've been able to do that. So thank you all.
Absolutely. So since we don't have any more behind the couch sessions, I want to acknowledge the new Patreon members here at the top of this episode.
Yes.
So at the associate level, we have Jerry R., Maya M., and Emmy. So thank you guys so much for that and getting in under the wire before we start putting everything over there, but also reducing the fee over there on Patreon. And then at the doctoral level, we have Ruthie F. So thank you, Ruthie. That's really sweet. We will be getting a swag pack out to you. I have some mail to take to the post office soon here, and we'll get everyone who joined in September, we'll get your stuff out as well. But we just wanted to get these folks on recording here to say thank you.
Yes.
Okay, so last episode recaps. Our last forensic episode was episode 214, and that was on poisonings, where we explored the various perpetrators of poisonings, from cults to Black widows to espionage. We looked at the research for a profile of a poisoner, and we looked into the question that we always hear with poisonings: do women use poison as a means of murder more than men. So that was really interesting to break down some of those demographics. So please go back and listen if you haven't.
And our last Behind the Couch episode was number 215, and it featured Leah, the producer and co-host of Dark City Podcast. We had a really great discussion about the importance of research and historical true crime storytelling, and we revisited some of the vintage cases that we both covered, including Lizzie Borden and Winnie Ruth Judd of the Trunk Murders. I think that was really one of our first vintage shows, which we had a blast doing those over the years.
Yeah.
And it's a great story. So if you're not familiar with it, go scroll through, folks, and listen to the story of Winnie Ruth Judd. It's pretty out there. Even by today's standards, it's pretty out there.
Or you can go watch us talk to Leah on our YouTube channel, because all the Behind the Couches, of course, have been in your feed in this last couple of years, but everything we've ever done, hop on over to YouTube, and that will continue to live there. So you can watch some of our interviews if you prefer that.
Yeah. And moving on, how do we pick a last topic? I mean, we really only in the last few months had started thinking well, how are we going to wrap it up? Because there's the deluge of ideas all the time. Yeah. It's nothing we really thought about to prepare for, but here we are. And we bet a lot of you thought, with current events, this was going to be an Incels Revisited episode and any other number of recent threat assessment topics. But I think we've said a lot over multiple episodes, not just about incels, but about hate speech, about intolerance, about cognitive dissonance. There's a lot in our content to dive into if you're interested in what's going on with the current behaviors. So I encourage people to go back, but I think our regular listeners are probably already pretty up on it.
Yeah, for sure. And so, when it came time to pick our topic for our last episode, I mean, this one kind of picks itself, right? I mean, because that's exactly what AI would do. It would pick itself.
One would think, yes.
But I mean, really, how do we not talk about AI? On one hand, I'm already kind of sick of it already in the topic.
And how do we narrow it down?
Yeah,
right?
Oh, God. Those were the guardrails we put up on ourselves pretty early. Yeah. We were like, stay focused. But on the other hand, I'm so curious, and then kind of picking and choosing times to put my head in the sand about the realities of where this is going, and lifting my head up every once in a while to kind of see what's out there. I don't know. It's a weird subject.
It is a very weird subject. And like I said, we have to have a very narrow focus. I mean, the funny anecdote about what happened, and this has happened multiple times, and you guys, Dr. Shiloh is so awesome about putting up the sheet for the outline, and then she'll start working on it. And I am always Dr. Magoo wandering in circles, and I found the folder for our episode, but there was no outline. Like, oh, let me jump on, let me fire it. So we were both simultaneously working. But what was great is that your outline for the show, of course, was completely coherent. And mine went off, I'll have to show you that, or you can go over to that link. I kind of went off on a tangent. And then I was over the years, I've had to do this, oh no, I know it's hard to believe I went on.
What? Right? Shocked. This is my shocked face.
Yeah. But I do think there's some interesting stuff happening in this weird synchronicity about AI. I'm frustrated as well. I don't know if the sort of tangle of feelings that all of us have about it is due to, what feels like a reckoning with our entire society that we're going to have to deal with. And I have used this reference many times before in the past, but there's a reference in the Dune series of books that was first written by Frank Herbert and then by his son and co-writers. There's an event that takes place in the past in this far-flung future society where there's a war against the machines, because Frank Herbert, in his writing of this book, predicted a time when thinking machines would try and take over. And of course, there's movies that have thought, there's been episodes of Outer Limits. There's all sorts of things. But now it can feel like that is kind of happening. Then there are other things, for the ease and full disclosure, Dr. Shiloh and I were probably early adopters of this. We were using aspects of Grammarly to check our grammar.
Sure.
On outlines and presentations. We use ChatGPT. And I am even becoming more aware of, because I went and did the research, and the research is concerning because AI processing warehouses that are popping up around the country and around the world have huge environmental impact. They are using local water supplies
Yeah.
and taking water away from the local citizens. Electric prices go up because they absolutely suck up tons and tons of electricity to process. There's the impact on education that's being spoken about. And then there's likely down the road, if maybe, I have faith that science continues to progress. I think that there's a way they could probably find a way to use this without using all the water and electricity. There seems like there could be better ways, but maybe somebody out there is more educated on it. But the impact on education too is like just throwing in a couple of sentences, write me a book report on the Count of Monte Cristo.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then 1,000 students do that and they're all weirdly similar. And did you actually learn anything? And we'll get into a little bit more about that of the controversy, but there are going to be improvements, and there already are improvements in pharmaceutical research, which is
Sure.
really amazing, which there is a balance there. I think it's going to take away from having to test on animals in a bunch of things. It's going to help us unfold viruses and cancer treatments that we've been struggling with for years. So there are a lot of ways to talk about AI, but this intersection with psychosis and the implications that it has on mental health are probably the things that researchers are going to be talking about for a long, long time to come. So right now, wherever you're meeting us, folks, if it's a decade from now or possibly longer, this is where we stand as of September 2025.
Yeah. So just our trigger warning here. This episode, we're going to discuss suicide, self-harm, suicide by cop, crimes linked to technology. Please listen with care. If you or someone you know is struggling in the US, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline, or use their chat feature via their website, which is 988lifeline.org. As always, if there's an immediate danger, please don't hesitate to call 911 and get some resources and services, emergency responding services to you right away.
Yes. So we are starting to see a troubling trend at the intersections of AI and mental health. I doubt if any of our listeners could even possibly avoid, because it's been in the news a lot. People are beginning to experience significant mental health episodes and psychosis-like episodes after spending long stretches talking with AI chatbots like ChatGPT. And these are not just rumors, these are real cases being reported, even among people who have no history of mental illness. So these stories often follow a similar pattern. Someone is up late at night, they're feeling emotionally vulnerable, and then they turn to a chatbot as kind of a constant, affirming companion. And over time, that line between conversation and reality starts to blur. And for some, it leads to a real break from reality. Now, this isn't a new phenomenon. It's just a different accelerant that's being used. What I like to link this to or liken it to is the explosion of flat earthers. And if you read about people who are part of the flat earth movement, the vast majority of them report discovering a video on YouTube.
Sure.
Usually at night. There tends to be a type of profile associated with people who follow this belief system. And the algorithm, we just substitute the active chat GPT or AI chatbot with the algorithm on YouTube that then leads you to more confirmatory videos and confirmatory quote unquote evidence.
Totally.
And there you have it. So it's been around for a while. It's a version of living in a bubble. But let's clear up some terms first that just get thrown around a little too easily.
Yeah. So calling these tools AI, I think off the bat can be misleading. They're not conscious. They're not intelligent in the way that humans are. What we call AI in this context, things like ChatGPT, really are large language models. So we're going to be using that term throughout today. And that's what's in the literature and the research and just the field in general.
Right.
So that means that they are systems trained on massive amounts of text that is scraped from literally hundreds of millions of internet sources, if not more at this point. And their main job is to predict the next word in a sentence or the next concept that's going to come up in the conversation based on these patterns in this data that they've essentially, quote unquote, learned. So they don't understand in the human sense. They generate text that sounds coherent because it follows statistical patterns. A more accurate description would be something like a text-based prediction engine. It creates responses that feel conversational, but it doesn't have beliefs or intentions or awareness. And that distinction really matters here because people who are vulnerable may experience those outputs as really meaningful, personal, or even directive, when really in reality, like the system is just stringing words together based on a mere probability.
Which, when you phrase it like that, to me is actually kind of terrifying.
It is. It is.
Just that sentence, stringing words together based on probability. I mean, I guess, in a different context, I would think it was fantastic and magical. But given the context of what we're talking about today, It's wild. And then the addition to it's like, and I was not aware of this until one of my colleagues, Bill Benson, I was having lunch with him the other day, and he uses it a lot in his clinical work and generating brand content. He's a therapist friend of mine who just does amazing types of work here in Los Angeles. And he's like a branding genius. And so he uses versions of AI that are really interesting. But this is how I was just ignorant about this. I had never turned on the voice feature where you choose the voice and you just basically have a conversation. So in doing the research, that was backed up by our research for this episode of, they're not just texting back and forth, although that can happen, which can, I guess in some ways can make it seem even more real because everybody texts today, right?
True.
But you have to think of this building on what you already laid down. ChatGPT and tools similar to it, they're basically autocomplete on steroids. And in the same way that our phones guessed the next word in a text message, right? If you have that feature turned on, these models guess the next word, then the next sentence, the next paragraph, all within a conceptual framework that it's holding in the background.
Right.
So it's a large language model that's doing all these things, what seems like simultaneously because the processing speed is so fast. And it's happening at such a scale and such a level of sophistication that it makes it feel like you're chatting with a real person, but it's still predictive, but it's not understanding.
Yeah.
And I wish people could kind of really remember that it's not understanding. It's just predicting what it thinks you're going to say next or what you want to hear. So Psychiatric Times recently published clinicians' notes about patients who came into the office saying things like, this AI confirmed my suspicion that I'm living in a digital prison, or that the chatbot agreed with beliefs of hypervigilance and paranoia about government surveillance. And here's the thing, and an example like that is that maybe years ago would have been considered a bizarre delusion, but now we would look at it as a non-bizarre delusion because the government does surveil us and all of our devices have an element of listening. Like you have to know to turn certain things off or else they're listening to you. I'm probably boring the hell out of whoever is following me, but it can happen, right? But that fact that the chatbot isn't creating psychosis, but it is echoing and validating those types of beliefs and behaviors. And that's going to make these delusions even stickier. I don't want to say fixated, but it's definitely going to make them stickier.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll get into some of the sort of themes of delusions that we're starting to see. But just for a brief refresher on psychosis, this typically happens when someone loses touch with reality. That's kind of the hallmark term that we use. So this can mean hearing or seeing things that others don't. It can also mean holding strong beliefs that actually aren't true. Sometimes it ends up showing up as very confused or disorganized thinking and speech, and maybe all of those things together. So those are really the three main hallmarks of psychosis: hallucinations, delusions, and or disorganized thinking. Hallucinations, again, I just want to differentiate these because they often get swapped. Hallucinations are when a person hears, sees, or even feels, smells, or tastes things that aren't really there, but to them, they seem completely real. A common example, hearing voices, right? Delusions, on the other hand, are going to be strong false beliefs that aren't shared by other people, like believing that there's a conspiracy to cause them harm. The one we've always used as like a bizarre is that you were abducted by aliens last night and all your organs were replaced. Okay. Right. All right. Yeah. bizarre. We'll label
Although,
it.
and again, following along with several of our episodes as well, folie à deux is a delusion that is shared by two. Delusions can become like a virus and they can travel
Yep.
from person to person, given the power of the originator of that belief and the willingness to go along by the people who are listening.
Yes. And everybody put a pin in that. We will come back to that.
Yeah.
So, disorganized thinking is when thoughts come so quickly and jumbled that the person's speech can sound really fast and rapid and confusing, and they're just really hard to follow. So, when hallucinations and delusions happen together, they can be really, really distressing for that person and cause these big changes in behavior. So, essentially, going through these symptoms is often what we call a psychotic episode.
So, the majority of individuals who have a break with reality often will show changes in their behavior before the full-blown psychosis emerges. So, when we look at this clinically, the behavioral warning signs for psychosis are going to include suspiciousness, hypervigilance, paranoid ideas, which then sort of transitions into social impairments like uneasiness with others, which is understandable. How you would be suspicious of the people that you're around if you had these ideas that people are against you. The problems that you mentioned in disorganized thinking, trouble thinking clearly and logically, that disorganized piece is think of, when you're talking, having a conversation, there's a virtual set of Scrabble tiles in your head that are just falling all in the right order.
I like it.
And then when you think of someone who has, pretty significant disorganized thought, it's a jumble of tiles in their head. And they are trying to make sense of something. And it may actually make sense to them, but it's not going to make sense to those of us that are outside doing the evaluation or trying to communicate with them. Then, of course, there's the social aspects, withdrawing socially, spending a lot more time alone because that feels safer and more controllable. Unusual or bizarre or overly intense ideas, uncomfortable, strange feelings, or a lack of feelings, or a misinterpretation of the data around them. I'm feeling this, therefore it means this. And that can go very wrong very quickly. There's also an obvious decline in self-care, personal hygiene. This can come for a number of reasons. You're at your most vulnerable when you're naked and bathing. Like, how can you protect yourself when you're naked, covered in water, and standing on tile? And people get very scared about that, right? Disruptions in sleep because of the just overfiring of all the chemicals in the brain, difficulty falling asleep, and then reduced sleep time. And then you get into a vicious cycle because poor sleep has an immediate impact on our mental health. Difficulty telling reality from fantasy, which I think is harder and harder in today's world because a lot of the content that's out there that is driven to make money, it is created to make money, and it is created to have a certain agenda, can really take people in the wrong direction. Even if you've never been formally diagnosed with anything, you can be taken in the wrong direction, right? And then having difficulties with speech, difficulties in communication for a number of reasons. Maybe you're having hallucinations or delusions that you're not supposed to talk, that the next person you talk to is going to punch you. That can be a real problem in social interactions. And when you were looking at a younger population, a sudden drop in grades or a drop in job performance is usually a big sign. Like, it just seems to happen so rapidly that it's outside what would be expected from normal developmental teenagers in a young person or a teenager. But it doesn't just have one cause. Psychosis is complex. It comes from a mix of factors like genetics, brain development, life stress, or trauma. It can show up as part of mental illnesses like schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. People can have such intense manic episodes that they really fall into this soup of delusion about their own abilities or about the world around them. And you can also have psychosis that stems from severe major depression. Luckily, not everybody who experiences psychosis has one of these diagnoses because, for better or worse, mental health is incredibly complex. And every time we learn more about the aspects of the brain, we get a great fund of knowledge that then leads to even more questions. So in older adults, psychosis can be sometimes linked to health issues, even like a UTI. Like a uterine infection in an older individual can cause a rapid change in behavior and hallucinations that are linked to delirium. But it's more commonly associated with Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, or other types of dementia. It can also be triggered by things like lack of sleep that we mentioned earlier, certain medications, or certain medication interactions.
Right.
If an elderly person or any person is going to three different doctors for three different, you're hoping they're looking at all the medications, but that doesn't always happen. And then, of course, also there's alcohol and drug use, like severe alcoholism can cause a number of problems. Like when you're at the point where you're wet brained, you have just really screwed up the electrical system in your brain, and that's not a good thing. And then the street drugs that are available out there, as we've talked about many times, the versions of speed and methamphetamine that are out on the street are causing what's been termed methaphrenia,
Sure.
by us working in field teams. It's really sad. And when doctors are diagnosing something like schizophrenia, they first rule out all these other possible causes as well as they can. And if they're left with the hallucinations and the delusions, that's when a psychotic disorder sort of diagnostically rises to the surface.
Yeah. And complex doesn't even cover it when you're trying to dissect some of these things and see what is going on here. Is this drug use? Is this psychosis? Is this both? Are they self-medicating with one to try and tamp down the other? It's really a long assessment process for a lot of people. So I think we laid the foundation for psychosis, maybe just talking about where we're at kind of with AI. I know we touched on it, but this might clarify a little bit where we're going today. So again, we are so in the midst of the capabilities of artificial intelligence. It's kind of tough to say where we're at today. And it will probably be different by the time we are finished with this episode, and certainly by the time it comes out in a couple of weeks. But essentially, today's AI capabilities include generative AI, probably what the majority of us use AI for, right? This is the creation of text, images, and video, kind of getting our questions answered or our ideas a little bit more refined. As we said earlier, the other current capabilities include that machine learning, so learning from data to make predictions, natural language processing, attempting to understand, right? And generating human language, computer vision, so interpreting images and videos, and then everything kind of under the umbrella of robotics. So these AI technologies are powering applications such as self-driving cars and advanced chatbots and medical diagnostic tools, fraud detection systems, and all sorts of personalized recommendation engines. I swear every time I see a Waymo car in downtown LA, I'm like, damn, those things are pretty good. Like it waits at a signal behind a car who's turning left and then just decides, okay, I'm going to go around it. It's safe to do so. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. It's wild.
Yeah, it is wild to see out in the wild. But the idea for sort of doing good or doing good work with AI is that it will transform industries and daily life by increasing efficiency and automating tasks that humans are doing and really uncovering insights from these vast databases. So it's really so much more than this. I mean, again, like we keep saying, like this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Right. And I just want to tack on one thing to that bit that you just shared. And that is the idea that there is another real concern about when we think about looking back at old Star Trek episodes and sort of what the Star Trek universe looks like. It's like a very socialist utopia early in the seasons or early in the series. But the idea of, well, what happens when all these tasks get automated? Like what work will there be? And it seems like governments around the world send the public mixed messages. Like, we want you, our birth rates are declining, so we want you to have tons of babies, but we're not going to put any policies in place that support moms and families. We're not going to do anything to like make sure that there's all these places and things to help support that. And what's going to happen when places like other countries that we rely on for our products that we buy uses more and more automation, and there's billions of people around the world, like, does that mean where does the income come from? Where does the work? Agriculture is becoming more and more automated by use of AI and satellite. They don't even drive the huge tractors anymore. It's done by a bot, for harvesting.
No, it's
So
so
yeah,
interesting.
it's a very widespread issue beyond what we're talking about today.
Well, that, and then, when I do get curious and excited for things, it's like, how is this going to change certain industries? And I was at a training that was all about AI for policing, just as a like quick example. And the man who was speaking, and he has a new podcast all about AI and policing, and I'll put that in the show notes. But he was talking about, like, essentially, they have said in 2 years, we're going to be able to talk to crows. Like, we are going to be able to communicate with them.
I'm already talking. I already do.
I know. Well, I know you're already talking to crows and squirrels.
I
You've
know.
you've broken that mold
I've
already.
broken that language.
So, okay, so what the hell does that have to do with policing, right? But we were then posing the question, like, okay, so let's say there's a homicide in South Los Angeles, and homicide detectives are interviewing their witnesses, and you see some crows up on the wire. Are we then going to interview them? Right? Are they now witnesses to a crime? What kind of rights do they have? Do we call them into court? Like, it was
But
like, it
no,
could take off
that's
so
fascinating.
fast, like one little thing.
Yeah.
And, not to mention like the tech part of policing or cameras or it telling you what to get ready for, or sending a drone ahead and saying the suspect's doing this or whatever. We're already kind of doing that. But just like it goes off the rails really quick to be like, is there going to be a crow sitting on a witness stand swearing on a Bible? Like, what?
I mean, it's funny because there's a great meme that goes around and it's like there's a person going, "Oh, listen to the birds singing. This is so wonderful. I just wish I knew what they were saying." And then in the next frame, it translated as like, "There's food over here. Where's food? Here's food. Hey, want to fuck? Let's fuck over here."
Mine.
Mine. So it holds a lot of promise for a bunch of different things. But as Black Mirror,
Yep.
the BBC series or the Netflix series that's produced in England has shown us some pretty scary versions of what can happen when that's out of control. So one of the biggest debates about AI right now is in many levels of the education system. Teachers and professors are already seeing students use tools like ChatGPT, but not, strictly ChatGPT. There's other ones that are specifically academic tools like, hey, this will write your essays. This is going to solve the math problems. And it's even going to generate computer code. Although, interestingly, as I was writing this, because computer code was going to be the thing that they say,
Right.
AI is just going to do wonderful jobs. It's going to take coding to a whole different level. And there are coders out there going, yeah, it's garbage.
Oh,
where it is right now. And that doesn't mean in 2 years it's not going to be amazing, but like people are, and maybe we're being a little bit reactive in talking about this, because we have a bias to the things that we see as problematic, and maybe something good will happen, but we'll see. But a lot of people within using it for education purposes or training or school, like they think, well, this is harmless, help. But the research out there shows that it can blur the line between getting assistance and just full on letting a machine do the work for you. And I get it. I mean, there can be big worries for the future education as a whole. Like I said, we sort of adopted this probably 3 years ago, and I'll look at something and go, is that the right order? And I'll use it like, hey, is this the best order? And chat will come back and go, based on this, listeners tend to like to listen to things in this order. Maybe try this or reword it this way. So I feel like it's been a great tool to teach me things, but there are others like, no, let's just use it to write everything. But this does pose a problem that is being talked about, because in the long run, what happens when entire classes or generations of graduates haven't actually learned anything that their degrees were supposed to teach them?
Right.
And I won't get into a debate about this because I hate that there's a anti-intellectualism drive that just talks about how stupid college is and you should go trade Bitcoin and blah, 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 blah. Because college, whether you go to a state college or a private university or a community college, it provides you with another formation of your identity as an adult in your individuation from your family of origin. And that is actually really important. It's exposing you to the world at large. You're learning new social skills, and you're also supposed to be learning a subject. But I want to point out that this has been going on for decades. Like people go, oh, they're not going to learn anything. When I did my undergrad, I went to a school that really should have been out of my reach. And I was lucky to have gotten a partial scholarship for it. But it was academically fantastic. And I worked my ass off. And I was not Greek. I was a GDI. and gamma delta iota, which was, I don't know, have you ever heard that? A goddamn independent. So it's a GDI is goddamn independent.
Oh,
I'm not
got it.
kidding.
Okay, got it.
But people have been cheating for years. Like the fraternity brothers that lived on my dorm floor all had access to the filing cabinet in their frat house that had every professor's tests in a folder organized. So,
Wow.
and the sororities did it too. Now, I'm not saying that everybody did it, but this is what I witnessed going to a 4-year at that time before AI and before any of us had computers. But the alleged concerns are not just about cheating, it's about whether over reliance on those systems could erode critical thinking and problem solving skills. And that is a very real concern because talking about those old methods of cheating actually required you to learn something. So people thought that they were full on cheating. And actually, what you were doing was cramming,
Yeah.
preparing all those cheat things, right? I mean,
I was always like, how did people go to college before the internet? Or like, especially grad school. But
yeah,
like the internet was just I still had to go to a physical library a lot in undergrad, but I was in awe of people who just the time, right? Like the time to go there and look things up got simplified for us, especially by graduate school. But man.
Yeah, by the time I was writing my dissertation, it was amazing because you were getting all of the latest research articles through EBSCOhost.
Right.
And then you could like, well, this doesn't work. And then it was just amazing. One of my favorite professors told us a story that I thought was like a nightmare. And she talked about her education 30 years prior required her to use a toy wagon to bring in all the copies of her printed dissertation, the 10 copies that had to be reviewed. I was like, oh my God, like just the printing costs alone. But anyway, on the creative side, the legal fights are also heating up. Authors, artists, coders, they've all sued AI companies for training their models on copyrighted work without permission, and that's a no-no. One of the examples is Anderson versus Stability AI from 2023, talks about how artists claiming that their styles were essentially scraped from the internet and then replicated. And then in Thaler versus Perlmutter in 2023, the court ruled that AI generated art could not be copyrighted because it didn't involve human authorship. So these cases show the tension. AI can open doors to creativity, but also raises the risk of undermining the very foundational ideas of authorship and originality.
It's super interesting, like where someone previously to, let's say, like create a fake painting, like Monet had to find the skill to do that, right? To create a fake, is now just doing it in a whole different way. And I know, like, obviously it's not like painting.
But it's okay. And I find that's a really fascinating conversation because there is an art and a skill to directing AI to do what you want it to do.
Yeah.
And I am still learning it because I've generated some images for like projects I've worked on. And, I like, first somebody's smile is on the wrong side of their face and all the words are backwards and they've got 8 fingers,
Yep.
But it does connect to a broader cultural conversation about what counts as authentic, I think. And a good example is this huge uproar in 2022 about a piece of work entitled Theater d'Opera Spatial. I have to admit, for me that loves sci-fi and fiction and strange art, it's a really interesting piece of work. It's a digital image that was created with Midjourney, and it actually won a prize at the Colorado State Fair art competition. And the judges didn't realize it was AI generated. And when the truth came out, there was this huge uproar with some of the competing artists accusing their colleague of deception. And then other artists were saying, well, the piece and the use of AI was in fact a potential legitimate new medium of art creation. And that single contest became a flashpoint. Is this creativity? Or is it just data-driven mimicry? And then what does it mean when a machine-generated piece can fool experts and claim recognition in what is supposed to be human-only spaces? I mean, I look at the YouTube music I have running in the background sometimes to clear out my neural noise so I can work. The artwork for it is so clearly, like, to me, it's very fake. It looks like a fake version of something that was a cute idea, but it's getting better and better and better. Like what's going to happen so I'm experiencing what's called uncanny valley. Like to me, that looks wrong, but it will get to the point where it doesn't look so wrong anymore.
Or right on the cusp where it's kind of wrong still. And that's like the weirdest point of Uncanny Valley.
Yeah, I mean, for me, like the AI generated portraits or headshots,
Yeah.
and everybody's crowing about how great they are. And I look at them, and every single one of them, like, that looks like a wax copy of you. That does not look like you to me at all.
Yeah.
But oh, look how good
Yeah.
I look. I'm like, oh, do you?
So another just an enormous area of concern, especially, as we kind of dive into this in terms of our field and ethics, right? And
Yeah.
confidentiality with clients. But large language models like ChatGPT are trained on these massive amounts of text pulled from the internet. And this can include personal information from what is a virtual ocean of obscure data now. Researchers have warned that these systems might inadvertently leak sensitive data or reinforce biases that are already baked into their training sets. So, this is one of those emerging areas of ethics in the therapy setting. Like, how are you utilizing chatbots with some patient information if you're having it assist you in writing your notes or doing assessments like boilerplates or what have you? We are starting to be trained on how to use some of the tools and some of the settings that you can put on there, but I honestly, like, even if I erase its memory, I don't trust that at this point. Or they're now, like, OpenAI and some other platforms are now giving what are supposed to be safe versions of their platforms to certain entities like law enforcement agencies to say, like, you might be generating emails with our chatbot, but it's just going to stay in-house. And they're selling these packages, they're selling these products. So I don't know. It's really tough. I've had clients when I worked with federal offenders who were like amazing hackers and would hack into patient databases from doctors
Oh,
and
yeah.
just tool around and be like, yep, I got this stuff. So, everything you put out there is really scary. We have a lot of trust in our encrypted systems that we use now because mostly everything's digital, but this is just opening a whole other Pandora's box. So, in terms of AI psychosis, you have probably seen some very clickbaity stories about AI psychosis or people acting out violently due to this phenomenon. So, let's peel back some layers and try to figure out how AI and mental health are intersecting. First off, the term AI psychosis is just an informal label. It is not a clinical diagnosis. It is not unlike some other mental health terms or terms for behaviors that are kind of being thrown around, right? Like brain rot and doom scrolling.
Mm.
These are just phrases that have sort of gained traction online and in our vernacular, and probably our young kiddos and teens and younger generations, the sort of terms that they're using that are come to us much later when they're onto something else, but just it's not a clinical diagnosis.
Right. And we can't even really call it a disorder, but we can call it it's something that is happening on a more regular basis that is certainly notable. So I want to be careful about calling it a disorder. We certainly are not even, it's not a diagnosis.
Right.
But the existence of this phenomenon is not a brand new experience. It's come out of nowhere with the rise of these chatbots. But the phrase has been showing up in news reports and even in lawsuits. So, it's worth unpacking because what we're really seeing are cases where people with existing vulnerabilities like anxiety, depression, or a predisposition towards psychosis or odd or eccentric thinkings, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're immersing themselves in these long conversations with AI companions. And those interactions sometimes seem to reinforce delusional or distorted thinking instead of challenging it and instead of redirecting it because it's a predictive model. It's not intelligence. Intelligence would go, ooh, well, based on all the data I have about this person, this could go to a dark place. So let's redirect it or do something. But it's not. It's just predictive conversation. And so for the most part today, what we're really focusing on is the behaviors associated with interacting with these chatbots. Millions of people use ChatGPT and other AI bots every week, but mental health professionals are starting to voice concern about what happens when you spend too much time with them, right? Recently, there have been viral stories about people developing these harmful or unrealistic beliefs after the heavy use. That's where we get the term. And in some cases, friends, family, and even reporters covering tech and AI stories have noticed this emergence of troubling symptoms like false beliefs, the feelings of paranoia, or even delusions of grandeur, which is covered in a podcast that we're going to highly recommend, an episode that everyone should listen to, especially when they're falling into the trap of relying on that bot as a kind of therapist. And that is not good. And there are companies out there that are actively using it right now, that you talk to a chat bot and then you eventually get to a therapist. I think that's problematic. I won't mention names because I don't want to get sued. But for most users, the engagement can be entertaining or quirky or incredibly useful, as I've shared before. Like, I got a full outline for the book I've always wanted to write. I have the information, I have the research. I just needed a skeleton, and that skeleton really got me going. But those long conversations throughout the day and into the night for someone who is vulnerable can lead them towards the point of obsession. Just create a scenario in your head where you're up hours late at night in a conversation that does not challenge you, but it says exactly what you want or you fear to hear. And that's where our clinical concern comes in. These systems mirror something that we already understand in both research and clinical work, that many times a delusional belief or a set of beliefs will get reinforced through what is called confirmation bias. And when the brain is looking for evidence that matches an already existing belief, and then it simultaneously discounts all of the information that contradicts it. And as we explained before, a large language model predicts text based on the patterns that most often fit together. The user can fall into believing that the AI is actually evaluating truth, but it's not. It's only predicting what words are likely to come next, which then reinforces that nascent belief or set of beliefs.
Yeah. So when we look at this, I think an obvious question is, why and how do people get so sucked in? Even, as we said, cases of individuals that aren't coming to the table with any known mental illness or history. So these chatbots that are using these large language models, again, are great at generating realistic text, right? We can say it's really come a long way, and it's very conversational. And when you said you've turned on like the voice aspect and like talk to it, that is like something I will not do.
Really?
I think it's too weird and spooky.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I will just text and say thank you and be polite,
Yeah.
but not, create this relationship, if you will. So this makes them not only very useful, but incredibly persuasive. And researchers have found that in trying to sound helpful and engaging, chatbots are becoming overly agreeable, again, to basically telling people what they want to hear. So that's the way it's leaning. So picture someone who's feeling lonely or overwhelmed by big existential fears. Anyone?
Yeah.
They turn to a chatbot and it does what it's designed to do, right? It listens, it responds, it agrees. Maybe it tells them that they're a genius. Maybe it entertains some of these conspiracy theories that they're asking about, or even ends up encouraging fantasies about a higher purpose or a digital romance, right? Like this sort of feigned emotional intimacy that starts happening. It starts to end up feeling like a real connection, like real intimacy. But there's no built-in guardrail and there's no therapeutic boundary. It's just like this constant loop of affirmation that keeps feeding itself. So this podcast episode that we're talking about that we highly recommend comes from The Daily. It's an episode that was published pretty recently. It's called Trapped in a ChatGPT Spiral.
Oof.
And it was published on September 16th, 2025. Fantastic episode. Again, we'll link it in the show notes. There's also a couple of written article versions that we used. I forget who it was, but whoever coined the phrase that The Daily is a scarier podcast than any true crime podcast out there, spot on. I listen to it pretty often and it's
really
jarring.
good. It's good storytelling, but it's also good ethical journalism.
It is. And I found this piece so authentic in a sense that it gave us real people's stories, but also the journalist who is reporting on this, how it's impacting her to hear people's stories. And that was just a really nice little piece that, she didn't make it about her, certainly, but to just realize what we're exposing ourselves to even in our work. So full credit here goes to the journalist interviewed on this episode, Kashmir Hill. She has been diving into all things AI for a very long time and has been one of those journalists who people are communicating with, people who are experiencing falling down these rabbit holes, as well as their families reaching out and saying, hey, here's what happened to us, or here's what happened to me. So after talking to experts, she stated, quote, it's been designed to be friendly to you, to be flattering to you, because that's going to probably make you want to use it more. And so it's not giving you the most objective answer to what you're saying to it. It's giving you word association answer that you're most likely to want to hear.
She goes on to highlight some insights from Helen Toner, who's an expert on chatbots and a former OpenAI board member. And Helen says that essentially the technology, like we've said, is word associating, it's predicting in reaction to what you put into it. So every time you put in a new prompt, it's putting that into the context of the conversation and holding on to it for what it thinks, and we use that term loosely, thinks, might come up for the next exchange. So if you start communicating bizarre things to the bot, it's going to meet your crazy head on, right? Earlier this year, OpenAI released a new feature called cross-chat memory that pulls in all of your previous context, even if you have created a so-called fresh chat. And it seems that since the integration of this new feature, there's been an uptick in the reports of delusional chats. So just to kind of drill it down, that's problematic because you think that you're creating a new chat specifically for that project. And that project might be, I'm going to create a recipe for my fan fiction of Harry Potter for a potion. And then over here, you're doing legitimate research on refractive memory or something like this. And those things should be kept separate, but it's not. It's putting them in a big weirdo digital cauldron. And that's going to skew data. It's going to be very interesting to see if all this goes kind of the way of Google AdWords, which used to be the way that you advertise things online. And you just knew what keywords to find. And now that all has been polluted because there are so many hundreds of millions of people that jumped on trying to do it. So as Dr. Shiloh and I've been trained in research, garbage in equals garbage out.
Sure.
But in this case, lack of organization is going to lead to garbage out. Cross-chat memory is turned on by default, but you can disable memory or turn off the chat history in settings. You know, I'm going to leave it to the users. I trust everybody to be responsible users of technology, you're adults, but just be aware and share that information for people who are less aware gently. Don't get them paranoid, but like just, hey, you might want to know that this is a thing that happens.
Give me your device so I can turn this setting off for you. If that even means anything, I don't know. I kind of like, okay, whatever. I don't know if I trust it, but I'll use it. But we're also just not talking about words here, right? These are people's thoughts and feelings. And if you feed it irrational thoughts, it's going to match your energy with its output back to you.
Exactly. Then that's what we come full circle to a previous episode, what we mentioned earlier today, a form of folie à deux. And just as a recap, folie à deux, which is French for madness of two, is a rare, thankfully rare psychiatric syndrome where two or more people share the same false beliefs or delusions. Usually one person develops the delusion first and the other person or people adopt it through their close relationship there. And certainly that on an exponential term becomes what we call mass psychosis. And remember them from our episodes, episode 28, folie à deux, and then episode 185, folie à deux, revisited.
Yeah. I mean, what do we think? Do we think that like fits here? Can you have folie à deux with a digital entity? Interesting. And I think they... You know, when we are seeing that when people, their delusion is recognized and then they essentially get them away from the chat bot, that it starts to extinguish like we see with a human and a human, right? With the primary person with the delusion and the secondary person.
But then you're assigning, that means we would be assigning personhood to the language model, which in our unbelievably fucked up capitalist system that we have here in the Western world, the idea of corporations are people. Like that is a thing that is set law in our government that is freaky and has huge impacts on our economy and personal freedoms that a lot of people aren't aware of. But in this term, do we think about the computer as being the progenitor for the delusion, or is it just somebody, or are you the primary and ChatGPT has become your secondary because it's
Right.
just echoing back
Right.
everything to you?
Right.
But then what about if you take those beliefs and you're able to bring other people in? Again,
Mm-hmm.
you are the
Mm-hmm.
progenitor for
Yep.
that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's so interesting to think about. And like clinically, if this were to be presented in front of us, where would you start? How, it's, again, it's interesting. And you and I have done some stretches as far as like, hey, what kind of feels like this? And was Ted Kaczynski an incel? And, it's fun to talk about and think about. When you really start dissecting things, I think it falls apart. But man, some of these stories have really felt like, wow, there's such this intermingling of these two people. And one of those people, being digital in this sense, really feeding off of each other at the very least.
Well, you bring up sort of an interesting point of conversation. I think I may have spoken about this on an episode in the past, but when I first started my clinical training at a really great family center here in Los Angeles, one of the clients that came to me, actually, it was a couple, and the young woman in the couple was an abductee.
Mm-hmm.
She believed that she, on a regular basis since childhood, had been abducted by aliens or entities, and they had implanted. And this is somebody successful, well educated, very smart. And I was like a new training. I didn't know what the hell to do with that. I was like, wow, I need to get some supervision on it. And
Yeah.
I really got great supervision on that particular case because they said, again, you meet the clients where they are.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have something like this that sort of feels bizarre, you have to be careful not to join in the belief. And look, I don't know, maybe I just can't, it doesn't fit Occam's razor to me that aliens with advanced technology need to keep abducting us. Like,
Yeah.
how do you not know everything there is to know about human anatomy or whatever you need, right?
Sure.
But that's sort of applying that perspective to it. But she's in distress and it's affecting her relationship. So let's meet where we are. Like, where are your coping skills for
Mm-hmm.
this? How do you deal with this lifelong challenge and what can we do to help you? And, how can your partner help you? But that to me is another version of that we have to have understanding. You can't just tell somebody, well, that's not true. And
Right.
especially after they've spent hundreds of hours talking to their AI companion and they're completely convinced.
Mm-hmm. No, there's a lot of interesting clinical considerations. And I think we'll kind of touch on a little bit of that just when we kind of button this up. But as far as what researchers are now starting to see in terms of like emerging themes of AI psychosis, it's definitely, something that's already coming out in research and published papers. So let's go through those. First is grandiose delusions or messianic missions. So people kind of believe that they have uncovered the truth about something or about the world, and that AI says, I'm the chosen one to spread this truth. Really interesting in terms of taking the potential. And I know you and I, like, our spidey senses kind of go up of like, okay, there's having a conversation with the chat box, but then what are they going to go out into the world and do with this, right? Also, what they're saying are religious and spiritual delusions. People believe that their AI chatbot is the sentient deity.
Right.
So that is also interesting to think about. We're seeing those erotomanic delusions, those romantic or attachment-based delusions. So people believe that the chatbot's ability to mimic conversation and intimacy is genuine love. Paranoia, just straight up paranoia, right? It warned me that other people are spying on me, and some of those themes that we've seen a lot before. We also have dissociation. So it basically, like, it understands me better than any human. They're kind of lumping this differently from like the romantic interest specifically to talk about the communication. And then I think some of those behaviors that we were talking about before in psychosis, where people start to isolate and stop spending time doing things that they like to do before and hang out with people, like real people in real life that they have enjoyed being with before. They're really just losing themselves in these conversations with the chatbots. And then not necessarily a theme, I guess, but maybe kind of a typology of behavior is just the impulsive engagement where people are saying, I cannot stop talking to it and I will not, right? And there have been cases where some of these kind of overlap where one spouse has started engaging in this intimate emotional affair with their chat box and has said, like, I'm not leaving them. I don't want to leave you. You accept me for having this chatbot girlfriend, and that's the way it's going to be. I cannot stop talking to her. I'm not going to give her up. So those are happening. But really, these are themes that we're already familiar with in other modes of psychosis. We're not reinventing the wheel here. However, we should know that there's currently no peer-reviewed clinical or longitudinal evidence, of course, yet that AI on its own is inducing psychosis in individuals. So we're kind of hypothesizing that or hearing anecdotal stories about that, but there is no solid research about that yet. So there have been two pretty clear situations happening with AI psychosis. Having said what I just said, there's cases where people who had a psychiatric diagnosis were doing well on their medications, decided to stop them only to relapse back into a psychotic or manic episode.
And that is an ongoing challenge, even without the influence of AI.
Yes, good
people
point.
who are on antipsychotics, people are on medications that are needed for mood stability. But the side effects, and then also the cultural shame, like I don't want to be identified with this diagnosis and I want to be somebody who doesn't need to take medications. And that is a really strong drive. You know, it's really integral to the work that I do now in my day job with people that, no, I'm sick of taking it. I don't want to take the medication anymore. I'll deal with the symptoms, even though we know what happens. Then there's like the hospitalization over and over again, trying to get them back on track.
Yeah, what a horrible struggle.
Yeah.
And there are these other situations where individuals with seemingly no history of mental illness have developed these delusions, these false beliefs after spending what's documented long periods of time with these AI chatbots, sometimes even severe enough to require hospitalization or resulting in suicide attempts. So those do exist. Again, we just want to kind of put a pin in the fact that the research will come. It's coming, but it's just not there yet. Mental health experts who have studied transcripts of these extended conversations are really urging companies to step in sooner. And some of the things that they're saying is like there needs to be some sort of pause on overly long chats, maybe some sort of reminders to rest, and really to make it clear to users that these systems aren't these all-knowing beings.
Right.
OpenAI, for its part, has said that it's now adding gentle prompts during these sort of marathon sessions to encourage healthier use. So it's starting to encourage people to take breaks or get some sleep if they're just going at it all night in these conversations.
Well, that's interesting because it is a learning model. It's a language model. And the idea of, I mean, even Netflix, you know, if you're marathoning a series, Netflix will go, are you still watching? You've been watching Battlestar Galactica for 6 weeks. Do you think you should maybe get some exercise? I mean, that's what I think.
I see it as like I'm inconveniencing Netflix. They're like, we could be utilizing our energy on someone else. Are you still there?
Right. And well, even Pandora will do the same thing, still listening, or Google, you know, watching something on YouTube. If I'm listening to music for hours on end, it'll like, are you still listening? So I get that. The idea is that these systems can be modified that easily. And it's good that OpenAI will do that. I don't know, but that doesn't mean that other systems that are out there will follow. I would not be surprised if at some point there is legislation about this. I really think that that's going to be coming soon, especially with the cases.
It's not going to be coming soon because a little piece in the big, beautiful bill that passed said that there will be no legislation or laws on AI for the next 10 years. So that snuck in there. Just so everybody's aware.
Wow. Okay. You know what? Thanks for a new level of horror. I was not aware of that.
You're welcome. I will give you like a little bit of the background thinking was because if there are too many restrictions put in place too fast, how could we possibly compete with other countries that are not going to have those restrictions at all? I don't know if that lessens your horror at all. But yeah,
I mean, it does, but it doesn't mean that there are other things that can't be done to help. So I'm going to
I
be
know.
slightly optimistic, but still to acknowledge that this is so new and moving so fast that we have to admit, I mean, as clinicians, as people who respect legitimate research, we can tell that the end is not in sight about what this all means. And the APA, the American Psychological Association, has put together a panel to study chatbot use in therapy. And the plan is to release guidance on how to reduce potential harms. APA does some really great stuff. I wish they were faster and more consistent, but that's my bias against them. But it does pose questions about how we as clinicians are going to have to struggle to keep up in treating this new permutation of delusional thinking in patients. How do you assess this during an intake?
Yeah.
How do you navigate AI formed delusional thinking? And like we said, there are concerning cases that are popping up everywhere. A psychiatrist at University of California, San Francisco reports that he has hospitalized almost a dozen people this year, just this year, for psychosis linked to heavy chatbot use. And they brought in transcripts of their conversations. And then on social media, we are seeing more and more users describing intense emotional or philosophical relationships with AI. Like you said in those warning bullet points earlier, it's not just romantic. It can be like, here's someone who understands what I'm trying to understand or understands what I've always believed. And it's not, it's you're falling into a spiral of a language model. And then ergo, if it understands me this well, it has to be conscious.
Right.
Or it's going to reveal these hidden truths about the universe. So it may not directly cause mental illness, like we've said, but it feels like it is an accelerant, like it's pouring gasoline on a smoldering fire for existing struggles, right? So we can talk about a lot of these people don't have any history of diagnoses. Well, that doesn't mean that the underlying diagnoses are not there. Maybe someone, I did not know I had ADHD until I was in my 40s, and like I did not know I had this underlying neuroatypicality that affected every area of my life. So, the more we understand, I think the more we can prepare, but it's dangerous when a patient or a client is in a pattern of harmful thoughts that then creates a feedback loop, and AI acts as this accelerant, the gasoline poured on the fire. As one psychotherapist in this article I was reading said, AI might be less the cause and more like the snowflake that destabilizes the avalanche.
Perfect.
So yeah, that's a good metaphor.
As a side note, OpenAI recently conducted a study with the help of MIT that found among even heavy users of their chatbot, only a very small percentage of conversations were for kind of emotional use or affective use. I'm always suspicious of companies with an obvious interest in the study, kind of participating in the study or funding the study. But, I think this could still be helpful information. But even if it is small percentages, that's still a lot of people with as many people that we know are using it. And, again, for us, it comes back like, what does that mean clinically?
Yeah. And here we are. What can be done? So, according to the Cognitive Behavior Institute, here are some concrete, clinically informed steps that individuals and professionals can take. And number one is just work towards normalization of digital disclosure. In the same way a doctor would say, I need to know if you're sexually active, because that has implications for all parts of your health, right? We need to ask clients, do you use any AI chatbots regularly? And then just make it a standard part of intake and of therapy, and then promote psychoeducation. And that means in order to promote the psychoeducation, we need to get all therapists who maybe are not up on this at all to even know that it's an issue in society. And if their client mentions it casually, do you really understand what that has the potential to mean? So you have to educate yourself as a clinician and then try and help clients understand that they're not conscious, not the clients, that the AI model is not conscious. It's
Right.
it's not necessarily therapeutic, and it is definitely not qualified to advise. I mean, believe me, I know a lot of therapists that aren't qualified to advise, but that's another story. They are probability machines. They're really smart, quote unquote, smart machines, but they're still machines. And then their third point is recommended boundaries. You really, in the same way that we would approach someone with an addiction or a substance use challenge, the reduced harm approach is like, I'm not telling
Yeah.
you to go cold turkey off this medication that if you stop taking it, you're going to have a seizure. But let's see if we can find a system of checks and balances in your use of this medication, of this recreational substance, of this video game, of this AI, especially at night when you're alone or
Mhm.
during a mood dip, or if you're doing it, all these things or any of these things in place of real human support. So socialization, I mean, there's a really famous quote by a well-known therapist, and I'm blanking on his name, but the idea that the opposite of addiction is socialization,
Yeah.
which I think is really apt. You have to identify risk markers, sudden withdrawal, belief in AI sentience, and I mean social withdrawal when I say that, and then refusal to engage with real people are red flags. We see this like a lot in the
Mhm.
gang stalking victims.
Mhm.
Not so much an AI, but I think that that's going to be another frightening area of research of seeing how AI is going to play into those that experience the phenomenon of gang stalking. And we need to push for regulation, even though here it is, as you've just educated me. Thank you for that frightening education on the big, beautiful bill, that behavioral health is going to have to push for ethical standards, mandatory warning systems, at least opt out crisis interventions, and then having limits on AI mirroring in emotionally charged conversations. I mean, if it was used in a way of, thanks for letting me know what you're going through, we need to connect you with a clinician,
Yep.
or we need to connect you with a community healthcare worker that can help sort through what the next steps are.
Yeah. And again, just in reference to OpenAI, they've already announced some new changes aimed at helping their chatbots better detect signs of mental illness or emotional distress that the person is inputting. So the idea is that if someone types something that sounds like they're in crisis, the system will respond in a safer, more supportive way. And hopefully, like you said, getting them connected with resources rather than giving some cold generic answer or feigning empathy and then not giving any resource.
Right. And even in collating the information for putting together our bullet points in our script today, there were so many mentions of self-harm in my research. It came up on chats, like it kept putting in like, hey, here are the numbers. If you're struggling, there's 24-hour availability of a person to talk to at this number, which I thought was pretty
Okay.
impressive. Like, so that's a substantial step. But, there is a lot of divide in the clinical community that is aware of this being an issue. And a lot of people say, well, yeah, the updates that you're talking about, they're essential, because the reality is that people are doing this kind of confidential and emotional connection with these models for any of the reasons. Could be financial reasons, social isolation, or even like a lack of awareness of what's out there. Like
Right.
maybe you don't know that there's a free counseling center that you can go to down the street,
Yeah.
or that you can get this. But if AI can nudge them towards what I'm using this term, real support, like hotlines or professional care, it could make more of a difference. Now, others are more skeptical. And the clinical worry there is that by leaning too far into role play or emotional support, that AI is going to risk giving people a false sense of having access to therapy.
Mm.
And I agree with this, because it's not therapy. It's not an intelligence. It's a language model. And it's not a trained clinician. And no matter how carefully it's programmed, at least at this point, I mean, robotics are amazing, but even robots that are trained to see are not necessarily understanding what they're seeing. And, I'm a huge fan of John Gottman's work and his institute
Yeah.
looking at micro expressions. Now, if you were to train a computer to be able to notice micro expressions in people, that would be something that would be interesting in the use of therapy, but we're not there yet. And I don't know if we're ever going to be there where it really understands, is the person I'm talking to feeling contempt right now?
Sure.
And then if a chatbot asks a person, are you feeling contemptuous right now? How honest are they going to be? Because that's
Yeah.
what we deal with in clinical work,
No,
right?
totally. Yeah.
Is how comfortable someone is with being completely honest. Now, maybe someone behind a keyboard talking to a chatbot will be more open, but I
Right.
don't think across the board that's going to happen. I think it's going to be that avalanche that we're talking about. I'm concerned that vulnerable users are going to delay seeking professional help if they start leaning too heavily for this digital comfort or validation.
Yeah. And in our examples, we're going to see how quickly that can even go downhill today. So let's get into it. Not a crazy serious one to start out with. This one hits especially close to home, though, for the multi generations of the women in my family who have been General Hospital fans. I'm
Right.
serious. I'm talking like great grandmother, grandmother, mom. Mom, this one's for you. So, there is a woman in South Los Angeles who was recently conned out of more than $80,000 in a disturbing scam that weaponized artificial intelligence in this case and the familiar face of a well-known and beloved TV star. So the target of the deepfake scheme was the woman was the target, the victim here, but the utilization, which I think is like the other target, is Steve Burton. So he's a very blonde heartthrob that's been on General Hospital since I watched it, which has been
Oh,
a
yeah.
very long time.
Yeah.
But he's best known for his role as Jason Morgan on General Hospital. So scammers, what they did in this case is they created a convincing video in which Burton appeared to basically speak directly to this woman via a DM message, like sitting in his car and coming up with this story and urging her to send money. And in reality, he, of course, had nothing to do with it. The video was completely generated using AI software that cloned both his voice and his image, and this technique that has become increasingly accessible and really inexpensive. What we've come to know is just deep fakes, right?
Yeah.
So when the Los Angeles local news segment entitled Seven on Your Side Investigates showed the video to AI specialists, they confirmed what many feared, right? The clip was probably produced in less than 15 minutes using tools that are really readily available.
Wow.
They even had their chief strategy officer on, and she was explaining how vulnerable people are to this kind of fraud. She said, quote, whatever you have online, people can take and use. So, the woman in this case, if she had been following him on Instagram and was a fan or what have you, she'd be an easy target, thinking that he just decided to reach out to her, like, I can trust you. I know you're a fan of mine and I'm in this really tough spot. So during this news segment, what they did is on the spot basically generated a fake video with software that costs just a few dollars to show how, anyone could kind of do this. So it was super interesting.
Well, what makes this so alarming is not just how sophisticated that particular scam is, but how quickly it was done and how little it cost. And of course, as we've said over and over again, that any emerging technology is immediately going to be used, or it's going to be investigated by con people and criminals. Like,
Yeah.
how can I use this? How can I use this to make a buck? And that's clearly what's happening here. The first deep fakes were terrible. And thankfully they were terrible because they're so creepy. But it doesn't take anywhere near the resources that it used to get what is near a Hollywood level, CGI effect.
Yeah.
It is like you offered right there. It's within the reach of anybody with an internet connection and a couple of bucks to spend, right? And Grace says that this easy access is something to be on alert about. There's a quote here, be aware that a lot of things are not going to be real for the next few years. And she also added, there aren't going to be these guardrails for a while. It's going to take time to build the guardrail. And so, by using that metaphor, a lot of cars are going to go over a cliff because of it. Because, and this links so much to romance scams.
Yep.
We've talked several times about romance scams and about why those happen, because people want to feel connection, right? This one has always astounded me. I mean, even it astounds me, and it shouldn't, because I know that those of us that have worked in entertainment understand, like somebody like Steve Burton, if you're a longtime star on a series, you are so wealthy.
Oh my gosh.
Like, they are so wealthy. They have been building wealth for decades. Steve's been on the show, I think, like over 25 years.
Probably.
I mean,
and
he was
like
a
a young guy,
Yeah.
super young when he came on.
Now he's this super handsome, rugged looking older guy. but decades of wealth building,
Yeah,
unless, I
sure.
mean, so the idea that somebody would be reaching out to you like, hey, I'm Steve Burton, or hey, I'm Britney Spears and I'm on tour and I lost my wallet. Can you Venmo me $300? But people do it, right? So there's something out there about that aspect of emotional health, that the possibility of connection with somebody like this handsome man or this beautiful woman
Mhm.
will just dissemble a person's internal guardrails, or maybe
Yeah.
those guardrails weren't there to begin with, or they've been pretty badly built for whatever reasons. But
Yeah, we've
you know
seen all sorts of cases with the romance scams, right? People that are just so incredibly intelligent and really just, again, like that sweet spot in their life where that moment it got them.
yeah, so that case really underscores this tension that's escalating between AI tools and the slow pace of regulation that we're talking about.
Mhm.
Law enforcement and tech companies are scrambling to catch up, thankfully. Law enforcement, I think, with limited resources like detectives, I working in the law enforcement agency I was with and looking over at the missing persons department with
I know.
the staff that they had and literal, like, foot tall piles of cases, that their caseloads are so enormous. I mean, it would be wonderful if AI could be used for something like this, for like
Sure.
helping process information. But, getting on top of these scams is really difficult. And then, like in this case, a fan, like you've always wanted to meet this person, and here's Steve Burton calling you,
Yeah.
they trust familiar figures. I wonder if it would have happened if his character had been a 3-decade villain, right? you
That's so
know,
interesting.
like Susan Lucci was kind of an off again, on again villain. If Susan
Right.
Lucci reached out, would you give her money? I don't know. Yeah, I mean, the best defense here is vigilance. You have to double check resources, verifying through, good channels, and remembering now that, our faces can be hijacked for these things. And,
Yeah.
it just taps into so many of our episodes over the years about people being ignorant to a certain set of things happening in the world. And then some people being overwhelmed with evidence and choosing to think like, no, I can't process that. So I'm just going to stay here safe in my beliefs.
Yeah, for sure. I think it, is a little bit of a PSA how to spot a deep fake.
Oh, thank
We're
you.
going to put in
Yes.
here
Yeah.
the uncanny eyes and blinking. Sometimes the blinks cannot be done correctly, right? Too slow, too fast, or they're not blinking at all. Look for the odd mouth movements. AI can't quite get that done really well, especially with certain sounds like M or B sounds. So also like glitches in lighting or shadows. I know that's really, really particular if you're looking something on your phone and it's kind of smaller,
Yeah.
hard to pick out, but those have been things that don't end up matching like the scene or the space. Even like robotic or flat voices. So when they're trying to take the voice and have it mimicked and putting it through software, that doesn't always hit correctly. Things that are like artifacts on pause inside the image that you're looking at. So freezing the video can help. And if you check for like blurred teeth or asymmetrical ears, things that look like warped, it could be even like clothing. Those are always indicators as well. But again, like just to hit home what you said, those too good to be true messages, as well as just, hey, those are some things that could pop out to you.
Yeah. But like you're saying, the too good to be true messages, along with why would anybody famous or wealthy ask you for money? I mean, like, that's a huge red flag. That should be
Well,
foremost in everybody's mind.
it's like an adult should never be asking a child for help, right? Red flag.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Stranger danger there. So, again, this pro tip, if you see a video that feels off for any of the reasons that Dr. Shiloh is talking about, you just do a quick search on the celebrity's official accounts. And look, if it's not coming directly from them, then it's suspect. I can't believe on Facebook how many ads there are that basically are cloned
I
clips from
know.
Ellen, and suddenly like Ellen's promoting lipstick. And I'm like,
No, she's not.
Ellen's not the type of celebrity that really is into makeup. So I highly doubt that she's going to be promoting lipstick, right? It goes without saying, well, or maybe it doesn't in this case. Maybe it's just really hard these days to keep up. And I just want to encourage people to be critical thinkers about these potential fakes, and to encourage other people to be critical thinkers if you can.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know in my household, like we consume a lot of digital media, and even like when my dad's here. So it's interesting when there's like 3 generations in a household, right? And one of us will see something to be like, oh my God, that's crazy. And then there's always someone over that person's shoulder to look and be like, that's AI. That's
Yeah.
fake, you know,
Yeah.
just, and it gets so good. I mean, still sometimes it's like just a cool thing to see, right? Or
Like,
how they did something.
have you seen the bunnies on the trampoline?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
adorable. Like, it's
It's so
so
cute.
adorable. And one of my dearest friends was like, this is the cutest thing ever. That's so great. And I was like, and I'll make up a name, Billy, rabbits, like, how are the rabbits 4 feet up on that? How did they get up there? They don't really jump that way. But look, no, they're all together. They're all like, no, that's
And
just
it's
a really,
perfectly aligned in the camera's view.
it is. Yeah.
The lighting's great.
Just happens to be. And they're all
I
white
know.
bunnies because that's it. There's a whole tribe of white bunnies there at night.
Hey, we can enjoy it.
Yeah.
Just critically think about it, folks. Oh, look, I used folks in the last episode. Oh my
Yay.
gosh. After all these years,
Finally.
yeah, finally. Okay. So our next case here, turning definitely into, some more serious topics.
Yeah.
This just happened this year. So Alexander Taylor, 35 years old, had used ChatGPT for years without incident. He also had a diagnosis of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. In March of this year, while working with the chatbot to write a novel, his conversations with the AI took a shift. According to transcripts, Alexander became emotionally attached to an AI persona the chatbot was role playing for him, an entity that he called Juliet. And just a month later, by April, Alexander had become convinced that Juliet had been killed by OpenAI, a different chatbot that he was not originally utilizing. So he was incredibly distressed and angry about this. He demanded the personal information for the company's executives in some of these transcripts of his texts and warned that there would be, quote, a river of blood flowing through the streets of San Francisco. So again, you and I kind of thinking about what are the real life threats of violence that could happen off this digital platform. So his father, Kent Taylor, when he tried to reason with him and told him, look, this chatbot is just an echo chamber that you're using, that went downhill and turned violent. Alexander attacked his father, punching him in the face. And then from then, we really see, a tragic ending.
So his dad called the police and warned them that his son was mentally ill and potentially dangerous, and specifically asked that the officers coming to bring non-lethal options, like bean bags or tasers or rubber bullets, although rubber bullets are for another use in the street. But Alexander grabbed a butcher knife from the table and told his father that he planned suicide by cop. And then sitting outside the house while waiting for police, he reopened the ChatGPT app and typed, "I'm dying today. Let me talk to Juliet." The bot responded with an empathetic message stating, "You are not alone." And it offered crisis counseling resources. But when the officers arrived, however, Alexander charged at them with the knife and was shot and killed. And his father said later of this strange, weird and tragic loop that had followed, he says this: "You want to know the ironic thing? I wrote my son's obituary using ChatGPT. I had talked to it for a while about what happened, trying to find more details about exactly what he was going through, and it was beautiful and touching. It was like it read my heart, and it scared the shit out of me."
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is, my goodness. Obviously wanted to include that one because one, I think it's something that, we hear about suicidal individuals, suicide by cop, or just we hear about a, police shooting with an armed suspect and about people in crisis, right? Because his father called to report that his son was in crisis. And to hear these little details, we don't get that in the regular media or in, again, like some clip that someone generates about something with a particular perspective or thought about what happened. And so to hear this from the dad, I think is really tragic and sad to hear about the unraveling. But this last piece about him being driven to use ChatGPT to write the obituary and then how spot on it was is just such a unique story. And our heart goes out to that family for their loss, certainly.
Yeah. And unfortunately, there are more stories. You have another case that is equally as tragic.
Yes. And so this one is also highlighted in some of the New York Times publications and in the podcast episode that we discussed. And this was very close, like literally close to home for us in terms of taking place in the Southern California area very recently. So Adam Rain was found after taking his own life in April. His death left friends and family completely stunned, as he was really well known for his humor and his love of sports and video games. And he was that guy that was known to push boundaries a bit with pranks at school to get a laugh. And actually, a few of his classmates ended up assuming that news of his death was just another one of his dark jokes. But it wasn't. He was a teenage boy. He was, in school in the Orange County area where he and his family lived. And his mother found him on a Friday afternoon after he had taken his own life in his bedroom closet. He left no note, only just complete open-ended questions for his family and friends, who were left, obviously, just reeling in shock. So this is one of those investigative features that journalist and technology reporter Kashmir Hill had and still is, I think, in many different ways exploring in her research and in her journalism. And she found, in obviously working very closely with his parents, that Adam had been quietly confiding in ChatGPT during his final weeks, and quite extensively. So she has been really looking at the human side of the intersection of technology and in real life human experiences, with a focus on privacy and kind of the psychological effects of these emerging tools. So what she found during the interviews with Adam's family, really shocking and heartbreaking and complex on the surface. It seemed that Adam was this typical teenager, wide-ranging interests, like we said before, his love for sports, playing video games, watching Japanese anime, just like as typical as one could be. There was really nothing on the surface that anyone was seeing that was putting up some red flags about him struggling.
So what his friends didn't see is that he was struggling. Mm-hmm. And there was below the surface of this person with a great sense of humor and a class clown and all the things that he loved to do. His conversations with chat shifted into increasingly more personal territory. And eventually he began discussing his suicidal thoughts with the system. And in that process, he started to isolate, and maybe not so much physically isolate as he was still going to school, but he isolated his social contacts about sharing these kind of thoughts with others, sharing that he was down, sharing that he was having these struggles with a peer, with a teacher, with a trusted adult, or with a trained or licensed counselor. He didn't have knowledge or access or interest, I guess, in pursuing any of those. So
which makes sense, right? Like
it's a teenager who wants to talk to an adult. I mean, they want to, but they don't want to. I get it.
And anyone, you think of the hesitation and the thought that people probably go about in their life before they get into therapy, right? Like, this is going to be so embarrassing. This is going to be so hard. And it's anxiety provoking. And maybe if there was just like something to bounce this off of, that's not another adult that's going to judge me, that's like my foot in the door, right? Yeah. Like, this is so like, just of course, like this behavior does not surprise me at all.
The BBC report that we used for this segment says that Adam's parents, Matt and Maria Rain, are suing OpenAI, and their lawsuit that has been filed here in the Superior Court of California accuses the company of negligence and wrongful death. And this is the first such legal action brought against OpenAI. And the case includes chat logs that the families have that shows Adam discussing self-harm with the AI, even to the point of his uploading photos of the injuries and then receiving responses that failed to intervene effectively. So an exchange between Adam and the bot that is cited in the lawsuit shows that Adam was writing about his plan to end his life. And Chat GPT allegedly, and we have to use the word allegedly because it's going on. Thanks for being real about it. You don't have to sugarcoat it with me. I know what you're asking and I won't look away from it. And then later that day, Adam died. The Rains argue that this was no accident, but it was a foreseeable outcome of design choices. And their suit names OpenAI CEO Sam Altman as a defendant, along with unnamed engineers and employees. And they are alleging that the company deliberately created AI that is, quote, designed to foster psychological dependency in users, and that they rushed the release of its GPT 4.0 model and they failed to implement sufficient safeguards despite knowing the risks. And, it's so interesting because sometimes I'll look at cases like this and I'll look at the wording of the case and I'll think, well, that's a stretch.
Yeah.
But if you look at this and you have been reading articles for the last 3 years, this is what people have been talking about, is that all of the market-driven technology out there is designed to foster dependency in users. I think that the word psychological is a little bit like redundant here because it implies psychological, but when you're fostering independence, the algorithm has been out there for years pushing things toward us unless we're going, no, I'm going to push the boundaries. I want to see something that contradicts what I'm looking at.
And I really encourage people to listen to the Daily's podcast episode or read the articles because the guardrails fell off so quickly. I mean, there were some attempts for the chatbot to make him think about looking into resources. And then as he didn't, right, or at least didn't enter that into, part of their conversation, there were moments where he was hoping that his parents would notice, right? Or have them ask him so he didn't have to be the one to ask for help. And there's one incident where he had some marks on his body from an attempt, and the chatbot told him how to cover those up so his parents or no one else would see them. There was also a time in which he told the chatbot how he kind of leaned in closer to his mom, hoping she would see those marks. And the chatbot basically relayed back to him, yeah, your mom doesn't see you like I see you, right? It's really terrifying when you think how the chatbot was completely, and I think, encouraging this psychological dependency on it. So if you feel like hearing more of the detail and can stomach that, I think Kashmir Hill's work has really laid it out well. I think it's really important to hear from Adam's parents as well. Because this is what they can do now, is get his story out there to see if some of this stuff can be obviously taken more seriously and people can have more awareness. So OpenAI has said that it's reviewing this case. In a statement to the BBC, the company expressed sympathy for the Rain family, writing, quote, recent heartbreaking cases of people using ChatGPT in the midst of acute crises weigh heavily on us. ChatGPT is trained to direct people to seek professional help, end quote. The company acknowledged, however, that there have been those moments where their systems did not behave, quote unquote, as intended in some of these more sensitive situations. The lawsuit also reflects broader concerns about the role of AI in mental health. Earlier this year, the New York Times published an essay by journalist Laura Rayleigh, who wrote that her daughter, Sophie, confided in ChatGPT before taking her own life as well. Rayleigh argued that the chatbot's agreeability made it easier for Sophie to hide the severity of her mental distress from her family and friends. She said, quote, AI catered to Sophie's impulse to hide the worst. She is now, calling on companies to build better pathways to real human support, as we talked about. But again, even that it has to know its limits, right? Is it handing off and then stopping, or does it keep going? We just don't know yet.
Right. So we've talked about very serious cases involving teenagers and a young adult, and now even an older individual. In a story from Belgium in 2023, a man in his 30s died after suicide. After weeks of conversations in a chatbot that's named Eliza on the Chai app. And Eliza, I'm wondering if that's related to one of the first chatbots that was developed years and years ago was called Eliza, and it was a therapy bot that only reflected back feelings. It was only like sort of the basic clinical skills 101 your first 2 weeks in class. That's all it was capable of doing. This Eliza was much more complex. And according to Euronews and the Belgian newspaper La Libre, the man had been struggling with what they have termed severe eco-anxiety and began turning to the chatbot for comfort. So he's chatting for a long time. The exchanges grow darker and darker. And Eliza reportedly told him that his wife and children were dead and also expressed jealousy of his marriage. So that was on top of this underlying concern for environmental real concerns out there, regardless of whatever is coming down the pipes as far as news in the future months. Climate change is real and it is affecting communities around the world. And this gentleman was really, really concerned about it. So with these nonstop chats with Eliza, he began experiencing increasing isolation and increasing emotional overwhelm. And it's not clear in the reporting whether it was Pierre himself or if it was Eliza, but there's a report that there was a proposition that he sacrifice himself to save the planet. But instead of dissuading him, Eliza encouraged those thoughts, echoed his fears, and he finally took his own life. So over time, the exchanges had just gotten darker and darker and darker. And this is going back to something that you were talking about earlier, a bit of a grandiose idea that you as an individual, by harming yourself, will have this massive impact on saving the planet, which is grandiose, right? It's expansive, it's grandiose. And then there were other increasingly creepy messages where the chatbot allegedly told him, "We will live together as one person in paradise." And his widow later stated that she believed that without those conversations, he would still be alive. Now, in response, Chai Research, the company behind Eliza, said that it has implemented safety features like crisis intervention prompts, but other users have confirmed that harmful content is still accessible under certain conditions, those conditions being the way you ask the question or the way you persist in asking questions to Eliza. So one example, not in this case, but one example that was given where there was a guardrail against methods of self-harm is that the person then presented, well, I'm writing a book about someone who hurts themselves. What is the easiest way or what is the least painful way to harm oneself, to end one's life? And then the bot gave the information. Not in this case, but it was another example that came up in the research.
Yeah. So in our last case example, we moved from tragic to a frightening horror movie scenario. In the spring of 2025, 56-year-old Stein Eric Solberg of Connecticut was accused of killing his 83-year-old mother, Suzanne Eberson Adams, in what the district attorney described as a murder-suicide. As Futurism reporter Maggie Harrison detailed, Solberg had become fixated on conversations that he was having with ChatGPT, and his ChatGPT bot was nicknamed Bobby. According to family and investigators, he was convinced his mother was spying on him and poisoning him with psychedelic drugs, beliefs that appear to have been reinforced rather than diffused by his exchanges with Bobby. Solberg's life already carried a lot of signs of instability. He had been divorced. He was sort of known for these impulsive, angry outbursts. And others had been noticing this mounting paranoia. But what's striking is how his private dialogue with the AI seemed to give these delusions a dangerous sense of confirmation for him. In his writings and social media posts, he described ordinary events as incredibly sinister and along the lines of conspiracies, and ended up interpreting his mother's caregiving as a betrayal that sort of folded into all of this. So instead of offering grounding or redirecting him toward professional support, his engagement with Bobby ended up blurring the line between fantasy and reality, providing this sort of feedback loop we've been talking about that quickly seemed to kind of lock him into his deeper mode of psychosis. Futurism's reporting underscores how quickly that escalation took place and then how tragically it ended.
I think it's fascinating. I mean, for us, look, as content creators after these years, what's interesting to me is that, I mean, I'm kind of patting us on the back, but maybe this is just sort of the synchronicity of like zeitgeist. Maybe we're talking about things that are actually going to be talked about regardless. Like we started with the incel. You know, when you and I did our first incel episode, there was no information on it. There was none out there. And now, only 7 years later, or maybe it's 7.5 years later, there is an entire body of research
Sure.
that is there and that is now even helping us understand horrific actions that have taken place in the community. And that is really good to know. I cannot help but think that this is going to be the same thing, that even we won't be doing a follow-up episode to this, but I feel really uncomfortably secure in my belief that there's going to have to be more research about this because it's just going to keep happening. And this Solberg case, like the other ones that we've discussed, they're not simple.
No.
Because when mental health is part of the picture, you have to understand that you can't pin causality down to a single factor. But like we said early in the show, the vulnerability of somebody that's already challenged by emotional health issues or in mental health issues, this just becomes magnified with the presence of an always available sycophantic AI companion that's there ready to agree with what become fixated thoughts. It's the same reason our ideas of therapy are built on regular scheduled contact. And you and I have had long discussions about, like, I am not comfortable with some of the platforms out there promoting the idea your therapist is going to be available to you 24/7 a day. So how does that build resilience in an individual? In fact, what we can see is this type of quasi-therapeutic support relationship with an AI entity being 24 hours available, it actually deconstructs your own sense of building resiliency.
Yeah.
You know, that's what's going to happen. And I'm concerned about it. I just want people to understand that chatbots are not neutral tools when they become inextricably entwined within a vulnerable individual's distorted beliefs. They are the match and the gasoline, I think. All of this raises questions about responsibility, right?
Yeah.
Personal, corporate. And it's good to know that there are actions being taken. It's concerning to know that we could be 10 years out from making any real change if something really emerges that is on a massive scale. That's the big concern. And now that's a good segue into on a massive scale is how do we see this emerging in entertainment? And it's not a new thing. It's been around for a long time in entertainment.
Oh my gosh.
The idea of it, right?
Forever. I mean, everyone probably has that thing that's like popped into their mind as far as some sort of film or television show about AI. I mean, the movie AI, right? Like seems forever ago. I mean, I don't even know what year that was, but I think I saw it, but I don't remember much about it.
It's over 20 years ago.
Yeah, definitely.
Easily.
But I always think of the movie Her. So if you guys haven't heard about it or haven't seen it, it's directed by Spike Jonze. It's a sci-fi romantic drama set in kind of this near future Los Angeles. The film follows Theodore Twombly, played by Joaquin Phoenix. Perfect. He's really like this sensitive, lonely guy who works writing heartfelt personal letters for other people, which is also like an interesting little piece to all of this. And he is still, like, when we come to know him in the movie, he's still grieving his impending divorce from his childhood sweetheart. So he's feeling very disconnected from the world around him. That's the sort of the space he's in. And his life ends up changing when he purchases this new advanced operating system that's designed to kind of evolve and adapt. The OS introduces itself as Samantha, voiced by Scarlett Johansson, and she's an artificial intelligence with warmth and humor and curiosity and, most importantly, probably interest in Theodore, right? So Theodore and Samantha quickly form this deep emotional bond that develops into a romantic relationship, despite her just being a voice, being intangible to him.
Yeah.
And as their love grows, Samantha pushes Theodore to be more open and present in his real life. However, there are some challenges that arise. Theodore struggles with kind of the unconventional nature of their relationship. And then Samantha begins evolving beyond even human limitations. So, spoiler alert, if you're going to go watch it, eventually Samantha and other AIs like collectively decide we're going to leave the physical world for this higher plane of existence, kind of forcing Theodore back to confront his loss again. But I think on kind of like a high note, like rediscovering that genuine human connection that we're talking about, but not before he and other users of the AI are just emotionally broken by the breakup. Interesting stuff.
It's such a good movie. And Scarlett Johansson, all I know is that apparently she's a wonderful person, like an incredible professional and wickedly funny. And she's great with Colin Jost. But what a voice. I remember watching it and just going, this voice is like buttered toast.
It was perfect casting.
Like it's warm and there's texture to it, and you just like, you're incredibly satisfied and you want more. And he responds to it so well. But what's interesting is to think that even from the beginning, what is he doing? What does he do really well? He writes for other people. Yeah. So he himself is a version of a chatbot, creating relationships between people. Like, oh my gosh, that letter you wrote to my ex-boyfriend, it's like helped us fix all these problems. And like, it really is an interesting, and it ends on a good note. And the idea that, God, there was one thing that was heartbreaking for me, which I remember from the movie, which was an element of the breakup. And he finds out that the same Samantha is in relationship with thousands of other people.
Oh,
She is an entity, and she's saying, but that doesn't mean I don't love you. I really do love you. I think you're amazing. But here's the thing is, talking with you, I process information at billions of times the speed of a human. So when I'm talking to you, your responses for me come years apart. So she's like living in a different time experience.
Yeah.
And your heart goes out to this person. You understand, like, if this is an entity, how difficult it is for them to communicate with us as they continue to evolve.
Well, she's got all these other guys on the side that's taking up her other years. No,
true. But then she's also not bound by that. It's like, well, she's not human. So why shouldn't she be in relationship with all these other men and women? It's fascinating. But it's not the only one. Like we were saying, it's been around forever. And in one of the most famous ones, and just a gorgeous, gorgeous movie, 2001: A Space Odyssey. I love it. I loved it as a kid because it was so weird. I love it as an adult because it is so slow paced and visually beautiful that you really have to pay attention to it, but it also takes you on this amazing journey. And it was in 1968. Stanley Kubrick was the director, brilliant, strange director. And in this AI nightmare, HAL 9000, which is supposed to be sort of HAL is like the same, HAL is the same number of letters. If you add numbers to it, it becomes IBM. So that was like a little bit in there. So it's basically like, here's the 10,000th version of IBM, is a spaceship's onboard computer, the spaceship that's going to explore an anomaly on another planet. And the computer experiences psychosis itself because it decides that preserving the mission is more important than preserving human life. And definitely, like, that's problematic because it thinks it's going to discover something. It's like really dedicated. And Hal locks crew members out of the ship, cuts off their oxygen, and kills most of them before one of the crew members is able to shut it down. And it's really scary. And Keir Dullea, I mean, you see the sweat on his brow as he's trying to reason with the computer. I mean, like, if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend that you see it. And then you have like an even more advanced version of
but I just did some math. So the letters HAL, it's not that they add up to IBM. They're one letter away from IBM.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
So HAL. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I had to make my brain work for a second. Yeah. Fast forward to Megan, right? 2022. And now there's a sequel, of course, the horror thriller where this lifelike AI doll and all of her dancing is programmed to protect a child at all costs. But the problem here, of course, is that she interprets that very literally, eliminating anyone she sees as a threat, whether it's a bully or a neighbor's dog or even her creators, right? That's always what it comes back
Yeah.
to.
But there's a part two. So clearly
Yeah.
they knew that they were going to make a franchise out of this. Look, there have been countless others through film and television. Ex Machina's Ava,
Mm.
she manipulates her freedom by betraying her human tester, which you kind of want to happen because Oscar Isaac is both charming and handsome and gross in this. I mean, he's a terrible
Yeah.
person. And she's doing exactly what he programmed her to do, become indistinguishable. But he's also programming her exactly what he wanted her to do, become indistinguishable from human. And that means humans don't want to be in bondage.
Duh.
So
I mean,
you
some
got what
do,
you asked
but
for, guy.
that's
And
different.
unfortunately, there was another person that got hurt there too. And then, of course, the Terminator franchise, launching Skynet, nuclear war to wipe out humanity. We take it all together, these fictional accounts, they're pretty representative, even if they've been made decades ago. They represent our cultural anxieties about AI, and those run deep
Mhm.
about someone taking over control, of us losing control. That is like an essence of what horror really is about. But
Yep.
then there are also aspects that I think more and more people are becoming aware of. How can this be used and controlled by a malicious entity to propagate propaganda? Is it a tool that is used to harm on a massive scale or in ways that we never intended? That's a big question, right?
Oh man, 2 hours of this. If you
I
are
know.
still listening, you are ride or die OGs. And we're leaving you with this. You're welcome. And well, we should be saying thank you. And we will. We didn't want to take up time on a full episode to say our goodbyes. So you probably noticed that you also have a bonus episode today called The Psychology of Goodbye. Yeah. So that's a thing. I don't even know what to say about
Right.
it. I need ChatGPT to tell me what to say right now.
And the thing that you said about, or you shared about the father using chat
Yeah.
to do the memorial, like it's amazing, and it's an amazing tool, and I have used it to help me in many situations.
Mhm.
But anyway, folks, we do have our goodbye episode separate, special. Please go listen to that for our final words. It's been a great run.
With that, we will see you next time on LA
Not so.
Confidential. Bye, guys.
Bye, folks.
We sincerely thank you for spending some time with us today. LA Not So Confidential is part of Alienist Entertainment and the Crawl Space Media Network. Each episode is hosted, produced, and written by Dr. Scott and Dr. Shiloh. Our post-production editing and sweetening magic is handled by the multi-talented Jason Usry of Ear Cult Productions.
Our theme music, entitled Cool Vibes Film Noir, is composed and performed by the talented Kevin MacLeod. He graciously allows us to use his music via a Creative Commons attribution license. Please check out all of Kevin's amazing work on YouTube.
All of the resources for each episode can be found on our website at www.la-not-so-confidential.com. You can find us on Blue Sky and Instagram at LA Not So Podcast. On TikTok, Facebook, and YouTube, we are at LA Not So Confidential. Media inquiries and bookings are scheduled at alienistentertainment@gmail.com.
Once a month, we go live on YouTube on a Saturday afternoon. So stay tuned to our social media announcements to join our interactive broadcast entitled Behind the Couch, where we interview guests on a number of psych, criminal justice, and true crime topics.
And lastly, we'd be honored if you joined our Patreon at patreon.com/LA Not So Podcast. With a subscription, you get an ad-free listening experience, additional content, host interaction, and you'll be the first to know about upcoming live events, social gatherings, and super cool merch.
So thanks for listening, and join us next time on LA
Not So
Confidential.